Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 185 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, everybody. We're here, our father-son duo, here to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. Today, we're coming off of a bye week for our Nebraska Cornhuskers, but there have been some interesting developments behind the scenes with that football program, so we'll be chatting about that. We'll be predicting the upcoming USC game, as well as going over the big things that happen in the national world of college football as we get close to the end of the season.
Yes, it's now college football playoff discussion time.
That's true. But before we dive into all that, we're going to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage. I've got myself my Golden Road Mango Cart.
And I am talking to you from the college football gambling capital of the world and the Sin City. And I'm going to be drinking a Stella Artois from Las Vegas.
So fancy. All right.
Here we go.
Cheers.
Yes. Cheers. Yeah, we went out last night on the Strip and had a nice meal at a barbecue place that was actually pretty darn good with some live music, and it was a wonderful first day here in Vegas as we enjoy a convention here in the big city.
There you go. And we should say we're recording this on a Monday, November 11th, Veterans Day. So thank you to all our veterans out there who may be listening to this episode.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is Monday, so it's the day before the college football playoff rankings. So we don't know what the updates to those are yet, but we do have the AP and coaches poll, obviously.
Right. Well, and again, it's just early to really be overly concerned about the CFP, other than now that there are 12 teams, you can look at some of these top teams, and short of a fall off the cliff disaster, some of those top 4 or 5 teams, they're going to be in the top 12, most likely at the final one, right? So they're already in the playoffs, so to speak. It's just a matter of, do they get a bye week? Are they playing a home game, or are they having to go on the road? I mean, that's some of the battle that's going on there now, right? So
that's true. All right. Well, we're going to kick things off with some Husker talk.
Yes.
As we are wont to do. Now, on the last podcast, we did mention that Matt Rule was bringing in some new consultants to help with the team, both on offense and defense, though I don't know at the time we knew exactly who they were. Now we do. It was Dana Holgorsen on the offensive side and Phil Snow on the defensive side.
Right.
But the update we've just gotten today, as we are recording this, is that Dana Holgorsen is now our new offensive coordinator. Marcus Satterfield will remain as a tight ends coach, but Dana will be calling the plays, whereas Phil Snow is serving specifically as a defensive consultant, and Tony White will still be calling the plays there.
Right.
You and I obviously discussed our disappointments with Satterfield's play calling both throughout the season and specifically in the UCLA game last week. But we had both kind of thought that if he was going to be let go, it would be after the season was over. So it was quite a shock to hear that we're making this change, going into our 10th game, right, of the season. It's quite late to be making that kind of pivot.
Well, I was advocating, obviously, for a few weeks now that, this area of your team is underperforming. You've given your current coordinator a good shot, but I thought for sure they would be, basically bringing in a consultant like that. That's what I was calling for. You don't have to fire Satterfield. You just have to bring in some help and a new set of eyes. And let them maybe tweak the offense a little bit. But to have this announcement this morning that Holgorsen was coming in, and I kind of wonder, I don't know, what that dynamic's going to be like, but I got to suspect, knowing coaches that I have known over my life, that Satterfield is a competitive enough guy that he probably is not at all pleased with this decision or this circumstance. So you could pretty much guarantee he's going to be gone at the end of the year. He'll be able to find himself another job, but Coach Rule isn't necessarily going to fire him in this age where you can have as many coaches as you want. He's going to let him self-delete, right? But I don't know. We'll see.
Right.
We'll see what happens at the end of the year. But how much can you change the offense or the defense for that matter? But how much can you change the offense right now? You can't change the nomenclature. You can't change, other than tweak some route combinations. You can change personnel groupings. You can change formations a little bit as long as they're still formations that were in your offense and that you were practicing regularly. But if you try to wholesale change stuff, I just think that's going to not go well.
Well, so my read of the situation, because like we said, he was announced last week specifically as a consultant, that makes me think, and obviously we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that makes me think that he was just a consultant and was helping out with the team's practices last week, and talking with Satterfield and talking with Rule. And either because of Satterfield's reaction to that, or maybe Holgerson's proposals that Rule really resonated with, he made the decision to kind of promote him, a week later.
Well, it's possible that that's the case. That's not how Coach Rule described it.
Okay.
He basically, he kind of described it more like, he called Holgerson on the previous Sunday, not yesterday, but a week from yesterday, and, extended the offer to have him come down because Holgerson was already doing consulting for TCU. Yeah. And so he obviously had to step away from whatever that role was to come and do this thing for Nebraska. So I think that might have put a little pressure on Matt. He needed to do more than just offer him some side consultant gig. Holgerson was probably like, I want to be the guy.
Yeah.
And that might end up leading to a quarterback coaching change as well. Because remember, our quarterback coach that we brought in just this year was also a former offensive coordinator, and there was some discussion of him being the coordinator when he was hired, right? Or that there was going to be a co-coordinator thing, but that didn't end up happening. It ended up being Matt. It ended up being Marcus Satterfield's job exclusively to be the coordinator, and then the other guy whose name is escaping me right now. You can help me with that. It was just the quarterback's coach. But I don't know that was the long-term plan for him, So this can't be smooth in terms of how it changes the staff, right?
Right.
But the staff are professionals, and I would expect all of them to coach very hard for the remainder of this season. I think where you'll see more of it is maybe the recruiting situation might change a little bit, and it's going to be very interesting to see how much Dana can do. Now, I know Dana's history is one of great success. He has been a brilliant offensive coordinator over his career.
Right.
But I don't like his offense, and it almost abandons the running game. His running game is the short passing game, like the team we played last week and lost to, UCLA. He's a believer in throwing short passes and then throwing a lot of deep passes. He's a guy that will go for it long a lot.
Right. Well, to rewind just a moment, Glenn Thomas is our current quarterbacks coach, and I will say his official title, at least, is co-offensive coordinator, even if that hasn't actually been the case, practically speaking this year.
Right.
But I will say, if you're going to make this sort of shakeup, admittedly, now would be the time to do it, in that you have a bye week, obviously, to prep for the next game. So you've got extra time. And we've already had our starting quarterback be hurt. Now, Rule mentioned that Dylan is apparently going to start practicing tomorrow on Tuesday. And, it's not clear as of yet if he'll actually start in the game or if it will be Heinrich Harburg, our backup quarterback, starting. But we were already talking about last week, right, how Marcus Satterfield might change around the playbook a bit to compensate for the fact that Heinrich's going to be the QB. He's better at running it, not as good as throwing it, but he's improved at his throwing since last year, right? So how does that change your playbook? So we were already making some changes behind the scenes there. Now we're making an additional change with this new guy. And my hope would be, to your point, that he obviously doesn't have the time to come up with new plays or whatever, but maybe his play calling during the game will be better than Satterfield, because we had said in the past that, like, we have some more creative running plays. We've shown that we can execute them at certain points of the season, but he wouldn't go back to them, right? He would call very kind of standard, give it to the running back and run it up the middle sort of uncreative running plays, or his decision making in terms of when to call the run and when to call the pass, we would question. So
Correct.
if this Holgerson guy, who, like you say, has a long history of being a head coach both at West Virginia and at Houston, if his in the moment decision making is better, then maybe that will help us.
Yes, and that's what we have to hope for, is that Coach Rule hinted, and maybe this is him playing a little cat and mouse with the USC staff. He kind of hinted at the fact that no, you don't go wholesale change and add a bunch of new plays. You simplify some things. And he says, and he took ownership of it and said, it's probably my mistake that we didn't focus more on the plays that we did well. And so, he was basically throwing himself under the bus a little bit in terms of some of the decisions that he had made overall. But I also think that he may be playing a little bit of cat and mouse, that Holgerson's not going to change much, and then we'll look very different. You know what I mean? Like, that's a possibility, but I don't think it would be a very wise course of action, because I don't think you can do that even with a bye week, a week off and everything. I just, with the uncertainty at our quarterback position and everything like that, the last thing you want to do is make Harburg learn a bunch of new stuff, right? Because he's likely going to play most of the snaps, even if Dillon starts the game. Again, when I saw Dillon first go down 2 games ago with that shoulder injury, I knew he was going to be dinged up the rest of the season. I knew he was going to be one hit and out kind of quarterback for the rest of the year. Because I've had those stinger type injuries. When you pinch nerves, when you irritate a nerve ending, man, it takes forever for that thing to heal. And the only way really to heal it is time. Yeah. And the way he went off the field, I totally recognized it from my own past of having stingers and pinched nerves in my hip. And I'm telling you what, man, when that happens, it hurts like you can't believe for a period of time, a couple of minutes. And then it kind of goes away once because it's kind of an impact, instantaneous thing. And then it settles out after a little while, but you're numb. Like you can't feel anything, you can't carry it. And that's why he walked off the way he did.
Right.
So I just anticipate that he might feel fine and good, and he'll be able to go in there and start, and until he gets hit the first time. And then after that, he's going to go downhill fast.
Right. Which, to your point, if that's his situation, better for the overall confidence of the team and just keep everything stable, maybe to have Heinrich go out there first, and try to get something going, rather than Heinrich coming in, in the middle of a drive, replacing an injured Dillon, right? The feelings of the team and the crowd and everything else in those two situations are vastly different.
Correct. I totally agree.
Yeah. So to your point, this Dana Holgerson guy, he's worked as an offensive coordinator and assistant coach under some big names like Mike Leach, Kevin Sumlin, and Mike Gundy. He, like we said, he's been a head coach in his past for like the past, over decade of his career at West Virginia and then at Houston, though he was fired from Houston after a disappointing first year in the Big 12. It'll be interesting to see, how this changes things up. USC has their own changes that we'll have to look forward to in this game. But I think it definitely has made it a more interesting game, a little more unpredictable, both for us as fans and for USC probably as the coaching staff, right? Like, what changes do we make going out there?
Exactly. How are they going to look? What's going to be? All of our tendencies no longer matter, right? Because I think what Holgerson is going to bring to the table is a lot more quick release, because what's been happening over the last couple of weeks when we've been losing, um, Dylan's been holding on to the football too long. Why? Because our receivers aren't running good enough routes to get separation, and so he's not seeing guys come open, and he's holding on to the ball too long, and he's ended up trying to tuck and run because he had a little bit of success with that initially when people didn't expect it, but now they're kind of expecting him to tuck and run now, and so the strategy is squeeze him, right? Basically, uh, put pressure on him from the inside out and squeeze the pocket, and he will make mistakes. And so if he's our quarterback, and I still believe, Alex, that if he shows in the next 3 days that he's throwing the ball well and he's not experiencing pain and everything like that, I think they'll still go with Dylan as the starter, but then anticipate that Harburg's likely to have to go in at some point during the game after Dylan gets dinged, right? They'll try to get as much out of Dylan as they can until he gets his main shot, and once he gets that, then they might be more inclined to switch. So that's my prediction.
There would be the philosophy of, maybe you don't play Dylan at all. Maybe you sit him out, for the extra week so he can, be there maybe for us against Wisconsin, right? Which is a home game and probably our best shot to win out of these last 3 games. True. But to your point, these nerve endings, these stingers, they don't heal fast. So like, would an extra week really help him, or would he be in the same situation against Wisconsin where one hard hit sends him out,
Correct. I think that would be true, although it certainly more time away from contact, the better. So another week of not playing would probably be beneficial for him in terms of his ability to do his job. But we'll see. It makes this game very, very exciting and interesting now.
Yeah. And we'll, since Phil Snow is just a consultant, we won't talk about him as much, but just to briefly mention him, he's someone who has a long history with Matt Rule. He was with him at Temple as a defensive coordinator, also then at Baylor, and then at the Panthers as well. And he's currently has been a senior defensive analyst at the Chicago Bears in the NFL.
Right. And he has been doing this consulting from afar for us all season.
Okay.
But he did come into Lincoln for a few days to consult on site last week, right after the UCLA game. So that's like the first time that I think he was physically in the building for a couple of days, and then he left again, back to his job, in the NFL. Oh, excuse me. So and he's like 68, 69 years old. I don't know that he would even have interest in being the defensive coordinator at Nebraska. And I don't think Coach White is in the same boat that Coach Satterfield was in terms of, but I will say Coach White's defense has a problem, right? Schematically, teams have figured out how to run on us pretty consistently, right? And his response, or his method for shutting that run down then exposes the middle of the field, which I've talked about ad nauseum for 2 years now. That's the problem with the 3-3-5, is it has all this flexibility and you can blitz from everywhere, and you can come up with all these different schemes. But at the end of the day, you only have 3 big boys on the field instead of 4, and that changes your ability to stop the run, and that makes you do other things to make sure you can reasonably stop the run. And when you do those other things, it creates other holes in the defense at the second and third level. And that's what teams have figured out how to create when they attack our defense. And so Coach White's going to have to really work hard to scheme himself into success.
Yep. No, yeah. My complaints this season have been much more about the offensive side of the ball and special teams than defense. So I'm sure Tony's secure in his job position, and frankly, us underperforming slightly in terms of defense might help us just hang on to him, because obviously last year we had the whole concern that he might go somewhere else to be a head coach. Now, in an ideal world, he makes some nice adjustments and we really show out well against these last 3 opponents, and maybe he does get picked up, because we turn things around. So that's right. the best case scenario for Nebraska fans.
Yep, I would agree. But the good news on the to close the book on the Dana Holgerson thing is that he is a historically great offensive coordinator. He has not been a successful head coach, which means that he, like say Chip Kelly at Ohio State, is one of these guys that, given his age and the path of his career, might be looking to finish his career at a place like Nebraska where he's going to get paid very well and he can remain the coordinator, right? And still get paid almost like a head coach in terms of compensation, and not have to deal with any of the pressures of being the head coach and running the program. And for somebody that's in his position in his career, that might be ideal. And he just gets to play in his lab of, creativity, right? So I think this might end up being a long-term good thing for Nebraska and for Coach Rule.
Well, to your point, though, say we're looking past this season now, we're looking into next season. He certainly will want to implement some of his offensive philosophies in there rather than just reshuffling what Satterfield already has in place. And to your point, if he is more about this West Coast offense, short passing game kind of thing, not focusing on the running game, that's, like you said, that's not the direction we as fans would like to see the offense go in.
Well, I should say you and I, that's true. Collectively, Nebraska fans, I think, are at the point, and I even have to concede, I don't give a damn how we do it. As long as we're successful and we're winning, I can live with not running the football. I just think that philosophically, long term, in the Big Ten Conference, if you want to be successful at a pretty high level, you damn well better be able to run the football. Now, I will say this: the run and shoot, this Mike Leach spinoff of the run and shoot, has at times, when he had the right personnel, been a very effective running offense with successful running backs who played in the NFL later, right? So it's not like they never have running backs that are successful. It just has to evolve that way, right? So I'll give Dana the benefit of the doubt that he's going to be able to go in there and recognize just where our strengths lie, and if we can run the football more, he will do it, right? So I don't accuse him of being so blind that he'll ignore that.
Right. Now, talking about USC, according to Vegas, where you're currently at, they're favorites by 8.5. Not as big as I was expecting, honestly. And interestingly, their coach, Lincoln Riley, has announced that they are making a quarterback switch. So Miller Moss will be replaced with their transfer quarterback, Jaden Maavia. Probably butchering that name. But they've struggled for their standards as USC, right? They've had several disappointing losses this year, and clearly have had some issues at quarterback with turnovers and things like that. So they're also throwing something new at us, bringing in a new starting quarterback that we don't have as much film on, just like kind of we are to them with Harburg and this new offensive coordinator. So it could be, a game where either team, maybe comes in and things gel with the changes, and one team really finds some success early, or it could just be a very messy game in general. I'm not sure which way it'll go.
Right. I agree. I think there's a lot of unknowns. The bad news for us, good news for USC is they're playing at home. They also have had a bye week to prepare. So that's why they chose to make that switch. And that switch that they made isn't because of injury or anything like that. It's just a sense that he wants to see what this other guy can do. And that usually means that he's been seeing things in practice because remember, this guy lit up in their bowl game, the previous starter, and he came into this season with lots of accolades and expectation, right? So I expect this new quarterback to be every bit as good as the one that he's replacing, and probably with a lot less pressure on him, given that he's coming in, in game 9 or 10, or I guess it's week 10, with not really much to lose.
You may be right there. We'll have to see. We talked last week about how we're kind of, there's a possibility as well that, because their disappointing season is very disappointing by their standards, whereas our disappointing season is, more par for the course for the past few years of Nebraska. So there's a possibility that they have some, team cohesion issues and just not being able to believe, in their season or giving up, which I think makes it critical that whether we're starting with Harburg or Dillon in the game, that we go up early. If we were able to go up early against USC or keep it very close and competitive early, make it clear that it's not just going to be a blowout win for them, then, the attitude in that stadium could very quickly diminish, and momentum could go our way. So we'll have to see how that goes.
Right. Well, and you wonder what kind of crowd, USC will be able to draw to this game, because Nebraska isn't going to be a big game environment for the USC fans. They were already experiencing kind of a disappointing season, and there's plenty of Californians for Nebraska Husker fans that will make the trek and go to that game. I don't know if you've looked at prices again since we talked about it, but I suspect they've dropped a little, which will maybe make more Husker fans want to come out and take a look, and make the trip.
Yeah.
I don't know what the weather's like in Lincoln and Omaha, but I bet you it's better in LA this weekend.
Right. Yeah, I actually did take a look this weekend, and they were like, the nosebleeds were like, between $50 to like $70, for some of the more middle seats or whatever.
Which I would think $50 is probably face value, right? Like that's probably what is printed on the ticket.
Right. Right. Because I will say, looking at USC's current record, right, they're 4-5 right now. So they're actually worse than us in terms of their overall record. And in terms of the conference, they're 2-5. So they're way down near the bottom.
Right. Well, so is UCLA. And now they've beaten Nebraska and then Iowa, who people thought highly of. So
true.
They still have USC talent. What they have had to adjust to, much like UCLA has, they've had to adjust to the physicality and the week in and week out level of athletes and coaching that they have to face. Right. That's one of the big differences between the Big Ten and a lot of the other conferences. Is that the Big Ten, and I'll include the SEC in this comment, because of the money and the commitment and the pressure to be successful at all of those schools and those leagues. Man, it doesn't matter whether you're playing Rutgers, Northwestern. You can know that you're going to get good coaching, right? There's going to be good coaches across the field coaching against you, and nothing's coming easy. And if you have a weakness like Nebraska, people knew that we had weak special teams. They knew that, we didn't have the ability to consistently run the football, and they're able to take advantage of those known weaknesses and make us very one-dimensional. And then that takes our whole offensive scheme and kind of shoves it off the edge. And we just talked about the defensive weaknesses. When you have those obvious things that show up in film, then other coaching staffs are going to take those things you do well away and know that they can attack those weaknesses. You just can't have those deep valley weaknesses. You're always going to have something you're not as good at, but you still have to be good enough that people can't exploit you. And that's been Nebraska's problem in various ways for a decade, is we've never been a complete football team.
Right. Yeah. And when you look at USC's losses, a lot of them have been very close. Like they lost to Michigan by 3 points, lost to Minnesota by 7 points. Penn State was an overtime loss by 3 points. Maryland beat them by 1 point. Washington just beat them by 5 points. So it's not like they've been blown out by anybody really. But they've made enough mistakes. Like I think in that Washington game, they had 3 turnovers, I want to say.
Right.
So this is where Tony White, I think, has to come in and be aggressive and try to either go for, go blitz, go for sacks / go for picks, right? Let's try to pick off this fresh or red shirt sophomore quarterback that they're bringing in for his first big game. Let's get a nice pick off of that and give our offense, a short field to score. That sort of capitalizing on their weaknesses, I think, is what we need to do to flip this game in our favor.
Yes, I totally agree. Totally agree. And, we just need to stabilize what we're doing on offense and give ourselves a chance to take advantage of the talent we do have. And if we can more successfully, because of different play calling coordination, put together, and how I always talk about complementary plays. What I'm curious to watch with Dana Holgorsen is, does he have that ability where you can see him call play X and run that play, and even if it's not successful, run that play a couple of times, but then play run the opposite of X, run Y, and it's complement to that if you're stopping this, then there's a good chance Y is going to work, and you do Y, right? And then you have success with that, and pretty soon you come back to X and it works, because now they're worried about Y. I mean, that's how you got to keep people a little bit off centered, and we're not doing that with Satterfield.
Yep. All right, so now we get to the prediction part of the podcast. I want to be optimistic and say that with all these variables that we've discussed, that we may be able to come out on top. But the more realistic part of my brain says that USC is too talented for that. So my middle ground take is that we're going to lose, but that will be competitive. That'll be close, and we won't get blown out or anything. So I'm going to say that USC wins, let's say 31-27 over Nebraska. Wow.
That would be like the most points we've scored all year if we scored 27, practically. So I'm going to go 35-17 USC.
Okay.
Well, I don't think the experiment of Dana Holgorsen is going to work in week one. It might enhance our offense a little bit, but I think it's going to take a little longer for that to really start to display itself on game day. What I am hopeful is that maybe they do simplify their play calling, and we do focus on the things we do well, and we're able to sustain a few drives and things like that, and that maybe allows us to score a few more points. That's that would be 17. And then defensively, I just have a feeling that with this talent on USC that they're going to kind of open up a can opener on us, and it's going to be a little tough. But then that might lend itself to us being very competitive in our final two games against Wisconsin and Iowa.
Right. Well, you may have to swallow your pride a bit, but since you're in Vegas, you should go bet on USC. If they're 8.5 on the spread, you'd be winning some money if they win 35-17.
I just might do that, but I'd have to bet on the Huskers too, just so that I would feel good either way.
What a great betting strategy. All right. And now we'll make a quick mention of the Nebraska volleyball team, who thankfully are doing better than our football team. They followed up the big win over Wisconsin last week with victories over number 12 ranked Oregon and over Washington, both 3-0s in terms of set count. Would you say that the girls have kind of turned that corner that you've been waiting for them to turn this season?
Well, I would say yes, to some extent. We are yet to watch our offense click on all cylinders against a competitive team where we had all of our pin hitters, out left sides and right sides and middles all performing well at the same time. Even in these 2 3-0 sweeps that we had this weekend, there were segments of our team that did not perform very well offensively, but defensively, we're playing at the best level we've played all year. I feel like the discipline of our block is improving, so we're touching a lot more balls, and as a result, we're extending rallies, and we're getting a lot of good points, and we just keep an enormous amount of pressure on opposing teams, because it's really hard to get a ball to the ground against Nebraska. We are so good defensively, and we're being disciplined with our block that you don't get a lot of open net attacks, right? So, and then with our block touches, that defense is just too good, right? So, as long as we can keep doing that, I think we're going to keep winning. But I think we woke the sleeping giant when we beat Wisconsin's butt up in Madison, and they have in the two or three games they've played since then looked like an entirely different team. So that battle that we're going to have here in about a week and a half with them is going to loom really large, especially if we can take care of business. We have a couple of more matches here to play this next week. One of them against number 17 Minnesota. So it's not like they're chopped liver, but it is at home. These next two are at home for us. So I think we're going to do okay on those matches. So it's going to come down to our game against Wisconsin, and then we have to go to Penn State on the final weekend of the regular season to basically play for a chance to win the Big Ten championship at that point.
Yeah,
because I don't anticipate Penn State losing again until they play us, and I certainly don't expect Wisconsin to lose between now and the time we see them again. So and it's very possible we could get beat by Wisconsin if they play like they've been playing the last couple of matches.
Well, and you had mentioned that Wisconsin and Penn State had to play each other. Did that already happen?
That did happen, and Wisconsin crushed Penn State. I mean, annihilated them. That was the best match Wisconsin's played all year, and they really showed a much more disciplined and tightened up, backcourt, as well as their front court, who hit into a lot of errors against us, looked unstoppable. Again, when their tall players play well, they have the highest ceiling of anybody in NCAA volleyball. I mean, when Anna Schreck and Carter Booth play well, that 6'7" and 6'9" combination is just overwhelming to most teams. They outblocked Penn State 19-0.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah. So yeah, if Wisconsin can do that, no one's beating them.
Yeah,
absolutely no one. So we have a huge battle to climb, or hill to climb to take them on. But for now, we just need to take care of the games in front of us, and then hope that our coaches can prepare another game plan that can somehow get Wisconsin uncomfortable again. And if we can do that, I'll be thrilled.
All right. Well, now switching to the National World of College Football. On the last podcast, we did give some predictions for the big upcoming games. One of them was Georgia versus Ole Miss. I actually predicted that Ole Miss would win that one, 31-17. Well, you predicted that Georgia would win in a close game, 31-28.
Yep.
But the score ended up being a little bit different, a little lower scoring of 28-10, with Ole Miss pulling off the upset over number 3 ranked Georgia. Interestingly, the game started about as bad as it could for Ole Miss, where on their first drive they threw an interception, and Georgia quickly scored a touchdown after that. Ole Miss had to bring in their backup quarterback at one point because the first guy kind of got hurt, but then he came back in later. It was a rainy game. There was a squirrel on the field at one point, so it was just kind of a weird game in general. And they were only up 16-7 at halftime.
Yeah, and I really can't explain why Georgia isn't better on offense. But I mean, this has happened to them multiple times. This is not a one-time, one-off deal with Georgia's offense really struggling. I mean, they came back, of course, and beat Alabama, but in the first half of that Alabama game, they were atrocious. Right. And so there's something that's not quite together yet with Georgia. And now it's interesting because they have two losses now, right? Georgia's got 2 losses, and they still have to play in the conference championship game if they make it to there. And if they do and end up losing in that conference championship, do they still get in the top 12 with 3 losses?
Probably not.
Well, I don't know. I mean, because if you're quote quote good enough to be in the SEC championship game, right? Then surely you deserve, to be in the top 12. But let's rewind to last year in the Big Ten, and who did Michigan play in the conference championship game?
Iowa.
Yeah, and Iowa lost. You think Iowa was going to be in the top 12 last year? If having that set of circumstances, you follow my logic
Right.
here?
Well, and it also mattered the way they lost.
Right.
My memory is a little vague, but I'm pretty sure Michigan stomped them pretty good.
They did beat them. Well, in the second half they did, but Iowa kept it close for a little while. But the bottom line is that this is where that win-loss thing starts to play into all this stuff, right? And we've had some conversations on the podcast before about just that subject. So that's why, for me, given that my Huskers are struggling this year, one of the more entertaining things for me to watch is this 12-team playoff and how that committee filters through and deciphers who those 12 teams are going to be. And I'm hopeful for chaos. I'm hopeful for teams like Alabama or Georgia to end up with 3 losses and see if they still get in.
Right. Well, frankly, it was kind of a game where Georgia could have made the comeback. Ole Miss had to get 5 field goals in that game. So that goes to show you how often they were, getting onto that half of the field, but not being able to score, which leaves it open for Georgia to come back. But Georgia had 3 turnovers, which obviously hurts your ability to do that.
Well, let's say Georgia's defense is if not the best, one of the best defenses in the country. And so that you can rely on that, right? But you've got an offense that, again, is making mistakes, turning the ball over like they did in the first half against Alabama, like they did last week against Ole Miss. So that's crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I just looked. So it's interesting when you compare the Big Ten to the SEC. The Big Ten has a pretty clear upper tier of teams, right? You've got Indiana and Oregon, who are still undefeated. And then right below them, Ohio State, Penn State with 1 loss each. Whereas with the SEC, you've got I want to say 6 or 7 teams that have 1 or 2 losses, right? That are all kind of in the mix for that top of the conference. So Georgia,
right,
adding another loss to their record really kind of makes it even more messy.
Right, exactly. And Alabama has lost twice also, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So those are the 2 bell cows of that league for many years. And they're probably still the most talented teams top to bottom roster-wise in that league. And yet you sit there now with those 2 teams both having 2 losses, Texas, of course, having the 1 loss. And so somebody's going to be playing Texas most likely.
Right. Well, the other one is Tennessee, right? They only have 1 loss, and they're playing Georgia this weekend. So that's a big-time game. If Tennessee could pull that out, the rest of their schedule is definitely very doable.
Right. And then that gives Georgia that 3rd loss, and they damn well better be out of it.
Right.
If they're not, then this is going to be the first sign that the ESPN relationship is still in play, like we've talked about before, about the SEC and the relationship between SEC and the Big Ten and the ESPN, and the fact that ESPN got the broadcasting rights to this 12-team playoff. And we can go into the are we supposed to be finding the 12 best teams or the 12 most deserving teams, right?
Yes.
And that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes, we'll save that one for later. Now, in terms of Alabama LSU, that was another big SEC game. I predicted that Alabama would win 28-21. Well, you predicted that LSU would win 28-21. So we kind of flipped scores there. But that ended up going definitively Alabama's way, 42 to 13.
It was ugly.
Yeah. LSU had 3 turnovers in that game, including 1 in the end zone when they're about to score. And LSU had a touchdown basically right at the end of the game. So it was actually, they only had 6 points for the majority of that game.
Right. That goes back to Coach Kelly's time at Notre Dame. His teams don't have that grit factor, and that has come back to haunt his teams, not only in his days at Notre Dame, but definitely in his time now at LSU, where he's had a lot of talented teams, but it seems like when they get punched in the mouth by other teams that are aggressive and physical and are athletically comparable to them, they almost always fold. And I should have known that, right? I should have trusted my instincts on that. But I believed in the LSU, Death Valley Stadium to be a factor here, right? And knowing that Alabama's defensive secondary isn't really that good. But by golly, Alabama played well, and LSU folded like a tent.
Yeah. And I thought I watched just the highlights of that game, but I thought it was one you probably would have actually liked to watch, even though you hate Alabama, just from the perspective they let their quarterback Jalen Milroe really go for it in terms of running it. He had 4 rushing touchdowns in that game.
Right. No, I did. I did watch quite a bit of it, and I did love what I saw from them for sure. Absolutely. It was, and they were aggressive, right? I mean, he played an aggressive game.
Yeah. And we'll make a brief mention of this because it's been a theme of our podcast for the last few weeks. But after a face mask call that went against LSU, fans started throwing bottles and other things on the field in a repeat of what we've seen now multiple times this season since Texas first did it.
4 weeks in a row.
Yep.
4 weeks in a row. And I said on that first week, they have to come down hard, and they continue to not do that. And it's going to get worse. Somebody's going to get hurt.
Right. Well, I think I even saw something about some person on the field getting hit with a bottle or something. It wasn't like a serious injury, but people can get hurt by that, can get knocked out and stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, and just the whole lack of control. I mean, that can move a crowd from cheering and rooting and booing to riot. It just pushes that envelope, right? Because it's so physical of an act. And the conferences and the NCAA have to have a conference call about that this week and say, okay, guys, we're gonna come up with some new rules, and it has to include punishing the guilty party, i.e., the guilty team. It's usually pretty obvious who they're going for. Now, if it ends up being from another stadium, and they try to play it off as from the other team or whatever to draw the foul, we'll deal with that when that circumstance emerges, right? Because there would be a circumstance where it would be obvious we're in an away stadium, and yet the bottles were thrown by the home team. Wait a minute, right? I mean, it seems like that would be hard to disguise.
Right.
So it's pretty obvious which side you got to punish them right then.
Well,
there's got to be a penalty on the field, and there's got to be money involved, and there's got to be public embarrassment involved for that university.
There was a comment I saw that I thought you would appreciate. Colorado was playing against Texas Tech this weekend, and they won that pretty solidly, 41-27. I believe it was at Texas Tech. And
I watched that game. Yep.
I looked it up. Apparently, Texas Tech has some sort of tradition of throwing like fajitas or like taco shells on the field.
Fajitas. Mm-hmm.
Right. Which
tortillas,
yes. Which, if it's a tradition thing, it's going back many decades or whatever.
And it's flour. It's not.
Right.
It's not hard.
Right.
It's not a bottle of piss.
Right. Yes. But apparently, they were doing some of that during the game, and some things got out of hand in general. And I saw this on the college football Reddit. A Colorado fan said, "Holy cow, the refs let that get out of hand." Another Colorado fan responded, "I was in a section in Folsom Field that was ejected during a Nebraska game in the early 2000s. So it has happened before, despite what the announcers were saying." So I guess the announcers were saying it's not, you can't eject fans from the stadium. But this guy's like, no, it can happen. It happened in this Nebraska game.
Exactly. And that's the way. And you know what? After that happened, no one did anything for years, right? After that very public event happened at Folsom Field.
Right.
I mean, the people just didn't do that shit anymore because they knew, okay, I don't want to be forced out. I don't want to have my parents called and, all that sort of shit, right? Like it just takes care of itself.
Yep. Very true. And then the last game that we gave an official prediction for was Indiana-Michigan, a very big game in the Big Ten. I predicted that Indiana would win 24-17, while you predicted that they would win bigger, 38-17. But it ended up being a closer game than either of us quite predicted, with Indiana winning 20-15. Interestingly, they went up 17-3 by the half, were in pretty good control, but obviously only scored 3 points after that. So their offense really stalled. Both teams were pretty much tied on turnovers, 1-for-1. There was one critical moment where Michigan got down to the 7-yard line, right in the end or in the red zone, and had to settle for a field goal, which obviously would have made a big difference if they had gotten a touchdown there. So kind of weird to think that I saw people referring to this Michigan game as the trap game for Indiana, which, you never would have said at the beginning of the season, but it kind of was.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. Indiana should have been up maybe 28-3, right? They had some opportunities that they squandered in the first half. And then the most telling thing, and I told my friend Brian, who's been on the podcast with us before and is a huge Michigan fan, and he was ready to sell the farm and predicting, a devastating 45-point loss or whatever. And I said, no. What I watched from Ganetti or whatever his name is, what I watched him do at the end of the first half of that game told me he's beginning to feel the pressure, because he's been playing with house money basically this whole year, right? No one expects anything of us, blah, blah, blah. And he has called a very loose and open and aggressive, approach to playing football all season until the end of that half. Michigan was getting the ball to start the third quarter. You're up 17-3 or whatever it was, and you had a minute and 20 seconds and 2 timeouts, and he ran the ball twice, ran the clock, and win it at halftime. Now, I'm telling you, there was not another game this year where in that circumstance he wouldn't have said, we're going to go for a score. There's time for we're going to play till the final second. We're going for a score. But you could tell he was feeling the pressure of Michigan's defense and the fact that they had squandered some opportunities. He was probably anxious to get into halftime and maybe yell at his guys a little bit. I don't know. But the point is that mentality shift to me was very significant. And when I saw that, I immediately called Brian. I said, you guys might win this game. This is by no means over. I just saw something that I think is significant. And I told him what it was. And sure enough, Michigan just kept hanging around in that second half and very well could have won it.
Yeah. Things didn't all go my way in terms of predictions this weekend. Yeah. We gave just general predictions for the Texas-Florida game and Penn State-Washington. We both thought that Texas would win pretty solidly, but I thought that Washington might pull off the upset against Penn State after they beat USC, while you predicted that Penn State would win. And Texas did win dominantly, 49-17 over Florida, while Penn State won pretty dominantly over Washington, 35-6. So I was dead wrong on that one.
Yep. Well, and I'll tell you what, Alex, I mean, that's the beauty of college football. You really don't know. You're dealing with young people who have a lot of stuff going on in their heads, and you don't know how they're going to respond week to week, and things can change, right? So that's what makes football so unique, is that there's a lot of moving parts. So since there's so many people involved, 11 players on each side, man, that's a lot of people to keep going in the same direction.
Yep. We didn't talk about this game much last week because the result seemed pretty obvious, and it was on the field. That was Notre Dame, Florida State, which was a total domination, 52-3 of Notre Dame winning. And afterwards, Mike Norvell announced that he would be firing his offensive coordinator, his defensive coordinator, and his wide receivers coach. So clearly he's trying to clear staff there to save his own neck.
Yep.
after their 1-11 start or whatever they're currently at. But do you think
Yep.
it's enough?
Well, it depends on what his relationship and his conversation with his athletic director are. I think he's earned enough because of what he did last year and stuff that the athletic director, especially given what he probably still owes him, would be thrilled to have him retool his staff and see if he can right the ship. But there's no doubt that Norvell will be on the hot seat. So the people who take jobs with him have to know that they're going in, that they have basically a year to get the ship turned around, right? But I think they can. I mean, the talent and the talent flow into that university is still very, very good. And they just need to right the ship from a cultural standpoint and a mental standpoint, and they're going to be fine. But here's the thing that I find interesting. Notice the difference in how he did it and what Rule effectively sidelined Satterfield, but he didn't fire him, right?
Right.
Satterfield's still on our staff, and he may not fire him. I mean, he doesn't have to fire him, right? In this new environment, he doesn't have to fire him. Now he'll be the highest paid, offensive tight ends coach in the country if he were to choose to stay. But that might be the cheaper path, right? Versus firing him and having to pay him his contract anyway, and not having his services, right? So and you then allow him to already begin the process of seeking new employment, right? Quietly and out of the limelight, while still getting paid. So I just think that it makes more sense to do it the way Matt Rule did, now that you don't have a limit on coaches.
Right. That's true.
So just flat out firing people, I think, is unnecessary and more disruptive to the players and to the coaches and their families than letting it extend to the end of the season. But go ahead and hire new coaches.
Well,
go ahead and hire the new guys.
I was thinking about that earlier because I agree with everything you said. The one kind of downside to it is kind of, I guess, the awkwardness, right, of like Satterfield still being in the building, talking to the tight ends coaches, while there's another guy in his job, right, actually calling the plays and things like that.
Right. Well, no, but here's the thing. In that profession, right, in the coaching profession, everybody's been fired. Like it's part of the deal. If I don't perform or my part of the team doesn't perform, I'm out of here. They're not going to keep me. And I understand that as a coach. I get it. Right. So I don't think it's as uncomfortable as you might think it's going to be. And it actually helps him transition with his players who he's probably grown to love. Excuse me. I'm sorry for the coughing. But he has a relationship with those guys. He's now going to be able to say, "Hey guys, you know what? This is totally legit." Matt, Coach Rule, he's a friend of mine. He helped me get my start and built my career, took care of my family. He did a lot of great things for me. So am I disappointed? Yeah. Am I a competitor? Absolutely. But he's doing me a service here, and he's doing this the right way.
Right. All right. Then the other really big upset that happened this weekend was Georgia Tech Miami in the ACC. Number 4 ranked Miami ended up losing to Georgia Tech 28-23. Interestingly, Miami obviously did make some mistakes. They had a turnover at the very end of the game that kind of sealed the win for Georgia Tech. They went for 2 2-point conversions that they didn't get, so that's 4 points they could have had on the board there. And Georgia Tech had quite a bit of success running it. They had 270 rushing yards.
Wow. And see, Georgia Tech's kind of had a struggling year, right? They haven't had a great year.
True.
That's why that wasn't even on our radar as a game to give a score on or anything. That's how off the radar this game as a significant game was. And yet Georgia Tech was able to pull it off.
Yep. Well, and like I mentioned, it wasn't like Miami completely self-destructed and threw 3 picks or something. They played relatively well. Georgia Tech just played better, for the majority of the game.
Right. Exactly.
Meanwhile, we had quite a different game in the Big Ten with Iowa versus UCLA, the team that beat Nebraska the previous week. The both teams had 3 turnovers, so a total of 6 turnovers in the game. UCLA actually had 2 turnovers in their own end zone, so 2 basically touchdowns kind of taken away from them. You can see that if you look at the stats. They had 414 yards to 265 yards of Iowa, and yet they only won by 3 points. But I think that does give some hope to us Nebraska fans, and that UCLA, right, they had some losses this year, but they were against good teams. They played a tough schedule, and now they've beaten Iowa, who is the last team on our schedule, and Iowa beat Wisconsin the week before, and we should have beaten UCLA. So that gives you hope that we can hang at least with these teams that we have left on our schedule.
Well, I'm not sure I can say we should have beaten UCLA, but we had an opportunity to beat UCLA after starting that game horrifically bad. That's the reality of it. Yeah. Again, Alex, I don't really think talent is our issue. I think discipline and some coaching and some play calling are major issues for us as a team. And then we have the psychological hurdle that we have yet to overcome because we can't get to that 6 wins. If we could get that 6-win thing off of our shelf, right, and go to a bowl game, and even better yet, go to a bowl game and win it, then all the conversations about, oh, they're the team that hasn't gone to a bowl game in the longest period of time, blah, 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 all that shit would go away, or it would soften considerably. And they'd just start talking about the trend, the positive trend of Nebraska winning more games than they did the previous years, right? And that the culture's good, and that all these other things that Matt Rule has done so well are translating to success. Does that make sense?
Yep. And then another game that we didn't predict last time was the Holy War, the rivalry game between BYU and Utah. That one ended up going BYU's way, who's still undefeated, but only by 1 point with a field goal at the very end of the game. So it was 22-21. And actually Utah was leading 21-10 with 2 minutes to go in the second quarter. They got up to an early lead and then really struggled in the second half to score. BYU scored one of their touchdowns off of a kickoff return for a touchdown. So that was obviously a big one that went their way. And the thing that got a lot of people talking is that near the end of the game in the fourth quarter, BYU was kind of pinned up against the opposing their own end zone, I guess you'd say. I want to say it was like a 4th and 10, and they went for a pass, didn't get it, but it was called for pass interference, which obviously made the Utah fans very angry because it let BYU keep their drive alive. And the Utah athletic director really went at it in the media afterwards, saying that the refs stole the game from them. But for
the athletic director said that?
Yes, he's been fined.
Holy cow.
He's been fined now for saying that.
Well, you know what? It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, and from my third-party perspective, just watching that particular call, I think it's a totally fair pass interference. It wasn't like the most egregious thing in the world, but he definitely grabbed his arm and slowed the guy down. So I don't think it's one worth getting up in arms about as much as, Nebraska fans have been with some of the calls we've gotten this year.
Oh, and that's the point, is that kind of shit is taught, right? If you're burnt, if somebody, if you took a misstep and somebody's about ready to go by you and you need to grab them for a little bit to be able to recover, then that's better to do that than to not do it because you're fearing a penalty and then have them catch the ball and score a touchdown, right? So of course you do it. But the point is that the fact that there are so many of those calls that get missed, right? If it was consistently called, people would stop doing it. If it was like, you're never getting away with that, so don't do it, right?
Right.
But people hold on defense, people pass interfere, people hold on at the offensive line as a matter of form and instruction and training, because there's not enough eyeballs on the referee crews to see all of that crap. And so to me, I'm almost compelled to say, this game, if it's that important, maybe we need to add another ref or two. And I know that would be tough because there's already so many on the field. I would rather see us get it right more often than to allow this crappy, yeah, well, that's kind of typical. And that, yeah, it's probably pass interference, but, there was probably a play against the other team in the previous drive that did get called. And that's where the anger comes from, is the inconsistency.
Yep. We've talked about that quite a bit this year, for sure. And then one last game I wanted to mention, because it did have a really crazy ending, is Missouri versus Oklahoma, which went Missouri's way 30-23. But amazingly, the game was 16-16 with 2 minutes left to go in the game. But Missouri fumbled it. Oklahoma recovered the fumble and went and scored. So that was a scoop and score touchdown for Oklahoma to go up in the game. Then Missouri goes on a crazy drive and scores a touchdown to tie it. And then Oklahoma gets the ball left with just like a minute left to go in the game. And Missouri gets their own scoop and score when Oklahoma fumbles it after I think the quarterback got sacked. So Missouri wins by 7 with this flurry of scoring right at the end.
I was flipping back and forth watching other games. And when I left that game, Oklahoma had just scored and gone ahead. And I thought, oh, well, there goes a Missouri's chance. Oklahoma's going to win that. And what's his name's going to save his job. And then I saw the final score and I'm like, oh, Venables is in trouble. And I think he is. I think that he has got to be a guy that, much like the Florida State coach, is going to have to, make massive changes to his staff and appease an athletic director, or that athletic director is going to look at it and say, you've had a few years here and we've been trending in the wrong direction for almost the entire time you've been our coach. I think I need to go in a new direction. Right. And that's where I think Cignetti's name gets bantied about. Yeah. Oklahoma University.
Right. Well, I'm looking right now. So Oklahoma's currently 5-5, and they're 1-5 in conference play. And what are their? They have a bye coming up here, admittedly. But what are their last 2 games? Alabama and LSU.
So they might beat LSU and end up 6-6. Right. That's the best case scenario.
Right. Yeah.
And if they end up 5-7. Now, if you've got that, you're looking at their score. Can you switch back to previous years quickly or not? Because if you could, I would like to see like the 3-year trend of Oklahoma scores.
Yeah, well, yeah, it is. I think we looked at that on another previous podcast because you had brought up that Venables was probably in the hot seat.
Yep, and I think the trend has not been a good one, and you've now moved into this new conference that will eat you alive, and your reputation will diminish and your ability to recruit will diminish so rapidly in the SEC. And, like Nebraska's fighting that battle. All Oklahoma has to do is look at the Nebraska trend of the last 20 years and recognize that you don't have the right guy at the helm and you need to find the right guy. And the Cignetti character has done something that no one thought they could do. And they're not doing it, like if you go back to, when Scott Frost was the hot hire and we got him, right? He was coming from UCF, who was coming out of a lesser league. When was the last time that somebody showed up at a historic bottom dweller in the Big Ten or the SEC, and in their first year made them into conference championship material?
Right.
I can't think of it. Right. It's so rare. It just very, very rarely happens. So what Cignetti's done is different than these mid-tier conference coaches who do really well at the lower level. And then when they come up to the big boy leagues, they have to go through a little bit of a transitional process, right, before they can determine if they really are going to be that good. And this guy has come in and done it at the big boy table. So what more do you need, right? Like, he's the guy.
Right. Well, and to your earlier question, so Brett Venables, his first year was 2022. They went 6-7. Then last year they were 10-3. So they had a good year last year, and now they're 5-5. So he'll be, if things go as expected, basically he'll be one of three in terms of having one good year and two kind
One
of
good year.
mediocre years
Right.
at Oklahoma.
And that 10-3 still included losing to, did they lose? Well, it doesn't matter. My point is I don't believe Oklahoma fans are very happy.
Right. Probably not. But obviously, they're a bit like USC, right? They have high expectations. They know they have the talent, they've got the money.
Yeah.
So they expect a certain level of success.
Right. Sounds like Nebraska fans. But the difference is we don't have the talent anymore because we allowed our brand and our success level to deteriorate and remain low for so long that we're no longer viewed as being in that upper echelon. Oklahoma cannot allow that much time to go by. And I just feel like even the 10-3 last year, I don't remember Oklahoma as a team that I viewed as a real powerhouse or anything last year, even though they were 10-3. They must have been 9-3 in the regular season and then won their bowl game or something to get
No,
to 10.
actually, they lost their bowl game.
Did they? Oh, okay. Well, so they were 10-2. I see 10-2, and I don't even remember them being, a factor in our conversations. But maybe I'm just forgetting that.
Right. Well, it's different, right? When there were only 4 teams that could get in versus 12.
True.
It's a different world because they beat. I'm just looking right now. They beat Texas last year, but they got beat by Kansas and then Oklahoma State.
There you go. That's it. Last game of the year before the conference championship.
Right, and then they lost to Arizona in the Alamo Bowl. So that they kind of had like you say, kind of a disappointing end to their season.
Oh, and they must not have even played in the Big 12 championship game then because of those 2 losses.
Yep.
So they did. Yeah, that's what it is. So they were not even a factor in their conference championship, and then they lost in their bowl game. Crazy.
All right. So in terms of week 12 of college football, the big game is, of course, Tennessee, Georgia. Like we mentioned before, Georgia coming off of their loss. Tennessee beat Mississippi State this past week. But it is a home game for Georgia. And obviously they're very disappointed with their performance against Ole Miss. But as I mentioned, Tennessee now kind of has the momentum on their side. They only have 1 loss. So if they were able to beat Georgia here, they would be pretty secure in being able to go to that SEC championship game. So what's your feeling on how this one's going to go?
Man. Well, even though I picked Georgia last week and they disappointed me, I will pick Georgia again because it's at home. And I look at Georgia and realize they have one of the best defenses, if not the best defense in college football. And at some point that offense is going to get their stuff together. And when they do, Georgia's going to look better, a lot better. And maybe this is the week where that happens. And that would create even more chaos because now you got Tennessee with 2 losses, Alabama with 2 losses, Georgia with 2 losses. It would be interesting.
Okay, so what's your score then?
Gosh, I'm going to say Georgia's going to win the game 31-24.
Okay, so a close game. Well, I went against Georgia last week, and I was proven right, so I think I'm going to go that way again and predict that it is somewhat of a similar score where Georgia has to have some offensive struggles, I think, for Tennessee to win. I think if Georgia gets their act together on offense, you're right that they probably will win the game. But I'm going to predict that they won't, and that Tennessee ends up winning, let's say, 27-14 over Georgia.
Okay.
So we'll see where that one goes. There's some other interesting games next week. Clemson versus Pitt in the ACC. Oregon versus Wisconsin in the Big Ten, LSU, Florida. Those all have outcomes that should be pretty obvious. It should go Oregon's way. It should go, LSU's way. But this season has been one prone to upsets, so I guarantee we'll get some.
Well, and Oregon's having to fly time zones to get over to Wisconsin, right? So can they do that? In not consecutive weeks, but this will be like their second or third time having to traverse the country. And does that at some point have an impact on their play on the field?
Yeah, yep. I have seen some, studies about, or news articles, I should say, not studies, about how teams perform after they have to fly across the country, and especially in the Big Ten, right, which is more national and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. Okay. So, why don't you give a score for that Oregon Wisconsin game is obviously important to us, not only because it's Big Ten, but specifically because it includes Wisconsin, who is our opponent the following week. What I hope is it's a very physical game, and Oregon hurts some of their players, injures them enough that they are not available for 1 week later against us, and then they can be back and be great after that.
Right. I will say that was my thought when I saw that this game was happening, was that I hope that Oregon kicks their butts to Kingdom Come and back, so that they're not feeling great for our game against them. I will say both teams are coming off of a bye, so kind of similar to our game against the USC, so no real advantage there either way. Oregon beat Michigan most recently, whereas Wisconsin, right, got their butts kicked by Iowa. So I'm going to predict that Oregon wins that one pretty solidly, even though they are flying across the country, even though it is a home game for Wisconsin. I'm going to say they win that one 38-17.
Okay. Wow. I'm going to say that Wisconsin had a bye week, and that stadium can be tough to play in. And so, the weather could be a factor. I don't know what it's going to be like, but I got the sense that there's going to be a cold front coming through sometime this week that's going to hit most of the eastern side of the United States. And so I would expect the weather's going to suck. So I'm going to say it's going to be a little lower scoring. I'm going to say it's going to be 24-17 Wisconsin.
Wow. Which would
There
be
you
a
go.
huge shakeup both in the Big Ten and in terms of the playoff.
Nationally, absolutely.
Yeah.
But and I'm saying that as much because I hope it doesn't happen as that I want it to happen.
Interesting. All right. And we'll just make a brief mention here of, as we mentioned, the playoff rankings for this week aren't out yet, but we do have the other polls, and you obviously had some big setbacks for teams like Georgia and Miami, who are in that top four, who have now, in the AP poll, Georgia's now 11 and Miami is 12. You have some teams like Ole Miss, right, leaped up 6 spots in the AP poll to number 10 now. So, and we know that we've got Tennessee versus Georgia, right? So one of those two is going to fall down this week.
So here's the thing: if Ole Miss jumped up that much, do they only have one loss?
No, they have 2 losses.
They have 2 losses, and yet they're that highly ranked.
Yep.
Interesting.
Well, there aren't that many undefeated teams left. You've got BYU, Indiana, right? Oregon, but obviously Indiana's not playing this week, but the following week they have a big game against Ohio State, which will shake up the rankings within the Big Ten side of the equation for sure.
Yep, that's true. Interesting stuff.
Yep. And Notre Dame, is staying in there. I did look it up. Last week we mentioned that Notre Dame, how they might have like a special clause in the contract, like they did in the previous era of the 14 playoff, but they actually do not. I looked that up. There's no special carve out for them. In fact, if Notre Dame, say, was ranked number 1 in the country, they would not be one of the top 4 teams in the college football playoff, because it has to be, the top 4 teams have to be the champions from the conferences, the main conferences, who win their conference championships. So if in that scenario, they would be ranked 5th in a year like that.
Gotcha.
Right. So Notre Dame just has to, they get the benefit of, I guess, of not playing a conference championship game. And if they do well in their regular season, they go undefeated, or they only have 1 loss, generally speaking, they will be in that top 12 regardless. Right.
Right. And to me, that's crap, right? They should not have an easier path to inclusion than anybody else, unless they choose to join a conference. Join the ACC if you're going to do it that way, or join the Big Ten if you're still interested in, and they are interested. But this easier path crap bothers the heck out of me. Keep in mind that Northern Illinois beat them.
True. True. But I mean, I'm looking at their schedule right now, right? They did play Texas A&M at the beginning of the year and
Oh, I
won. They
Yep.
played Louisville. Obviously, they play their traditional rivalry games like Stanford,
USC.
Navy, Georgia Tech, right? Who just upset Miami. They beat them. They beat
Right.
Florida State, who admittedly is down this year, but traditionally is
Right.
kind of a tougher team. They have to play Army coming up. They have to play USC coming up. So I guess they're getting lucky
Yep.
in that some of their traditional games, those teams aren't as good as usual.
Correct.
But they have played a reasonably tough schedule. So if they can't lose again, though. I think if they
No.
went to 2 losses, they would definitely be out. So they have to go
Yeah.
undefeated for the rest of their year.
I'm in agreement with you, I'm not necessarily down on Notre Dame, but it's just one of these flaws in this system that they're still making these special accommodations for Notre Dame. Why?
Well, but
The last time Notre Dame won a national title.
Well, there's no special accommodation for them in the rules of the contract, but just in terms of them being independent, in this world where now we have only 4 major conferences, that part is true.
Okay, but the point is that if they can get in because they don't have to play a conference championship, and other teams are less likely to get in, then because they have to play that extra game, that is an inherent advantage. Now, you could argue, for example, that the third best team in the Big Ten is not playing in the conference championship either, and they might still be one of the top 12, or the SEC, or the Big 12, whatever. They should be viewed in that same way, I guess, is the point. Where we're pretty much saying they're pretty much guaranteed to be in as long as they don't lose again.
That seems to be how it would go. I will just say one last thing. In terms of the group of 5, there is kind of an interesting battle in that you have Boise State with 1 loss. Boise State is the clear leader, in that group of 5 grouping. And then SMU is up there with, your Clemsons and your Miamis in terms of competing for the top of the ACC.
Correct. Yep.
So that'll be interesting to see how that all goes.
Yes, exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Well, this has been a fun podcast. Hopefully we'll be coming back to you next week talking about Nebraska's win over USC. That all these changes and variables we were talking about worked in our favor.
Right. That would be awesome.
It would be awesome. But it could very easily go the opposite way, and we've got to be pulling up our bootstraps and trying to get ourselves motivated for a winnable game against Wisconsin the following week. So
exactly.
Let's see how it goes.
All right, buddy. Well, you know what? It's even though we said that there's not a lot of big games this week, you mentioned just a short list. Just like last week, there's going to be some unexpected things that are going to happen. Maybe my prediction of the Oregon Wisconsin game will be the one.
Could be. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also reach out to us if you search for us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. So thank you out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.